If you're shopping for a family-sized hybrid, you might notice a serious lack of options, especially when it comes to ones you've got to plug in. Just take a look at the three rows out there. You've got the Chrysler Pacifica Hybrid and this new Sorento. That is it. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but unless you plan to charge it as often as possible, a plug-in like this might not be the right choice. For more expert car reviews, don't forget to share our channel and subscribe so you can catch some of this and maybe even a little of that. I gotta say, evaluating a plug-in hybrid makes an awful lot of sense for me this time of year because I absolutely hate idling, but it gets so bitterly cold that it is nice to have the heat on and my heated seat running. Well, when I'm driving a gas-powered vehicle, I don't want to do it because of the emissions, but with this, I can just switch it into electric mode, no guilt. I absolutely love it, and I know Will in the back appreciates it because he's got heated seats too. But you know, I do have to rant before we get started because I did have big plans for this plug-in hybrid. Now, apparently it's got 51 kilometers of all-electric range, and I really wanted to see if that was the case, so I decided to head out nice and early this morning and plug it in so I could make the most of the electric power. But I ran into a major issue before we even got started because I had to go to 3 separate charging stations just to find one that would work. The first one, it was broken, just wouldn't connect. It just kept telling me to plug it in. I was plugged in, the car wouldn't register. It was very annoying. Went to the next one, it had 2 connectors. Neither of them worked with the level 2 connector on this Sorento plug-in hybrid. So that was very annoying. I finally hit my 3rd one and I was able to plug in, but I killed so much precious time that I was only able to hook up for about an hour and a half. Now, when I got there, I was at 37% battery. And after an hour and a half, well, that only jumped to 61. So I added 24% in an hour and a half. Now, that's not terrible. This is a 13.8 kilowatt hour battery pack, I believe. So that's decent, but it's still not great. But I am still going to use my same plan here. I'm running it in the default mode that's going to rely on the battery power until that's used up. And I want to see just how efficient this thing really is, including when we're idling during filming. You know, that preamble really does kind of set the stage for this week's review because it's a plug-in hybrid and it really only makes sense if you are going to plug it in regularly. Now, you can drive it like a conventional hybrid, of course. There is a gas engine, but it's not quite as efficient, especially this Sorento PHEV. Now, some like the Toyota RAV4 Prime, well, it is about as efficient as the conventional hybrid version, but this one really does operate to deplete the battery and then kick over to the gas engine. It's a lot more like the Chrysler Pacifica Hybrid. So earlier this week when I picked it up, well, it only had about 11% battery, and I decided to hold on to that. I put it in hybrid mode, and after 150 kilometers of driving, I was averaging 8.1 liters per 100 kilometers. That's not all that great. It's about 1.5 liters worse than the Sorento Hybrid is rated for. Of course, with the battery topped up, that does improve because you are going to lean on the electric driving range and it's going to mix with the gas engine. That's what I'm doing right now. And again, that goes back to my point about testing how this thing does today. When we're driving, when we're filming, when it's parked, we're going to leave it running, but it's going to be in electric mode for as long as possible. As soon as the battery runs out, we will make sure to shut off. But I want to see how long we can go with the battery running, and that is the point of a plug-in hybrid. The other problem is, well, the cost, because it is more expensive, although with provincial and federal rebates, you can get the price down. This qualifies for a $2,500 federal rebate, and that actually makes the price of the EX version about the same as the conventional hybrid EX, so it is very competitive. But again, it's not going to make sense if you don't plug it in. If you're someone like me who lives in a building and doesn't have access to charging in your parking garage, it's really not going to work, especially because there is no DC fast charging capability, and that is pretty commonplace for a plug-in hybrid. You only get level 2, but that means it's going to take you a good 3.5 to 4 hours to charge the battery. If you had DC fast charging, that would be much quicker, but then I'm sure full electric drivers wouldn't be happy to have PHEVs hogging all the spots at their precious fast charging station. So it is really one of those things where everyone's got to get along. So you got to make the most of what you have, and that means level 2 charging. Now, I already talked about the battery pack. It's 13.8 kilowatt hours, so a decent size, and then that's paired with an electric motor, obviously, as well as a gas engine. But Kia and Hyundai both do something unique. They use a turbocharged engine instead of a naturally aspirated one. So this has a 1.6 liter turbocharged 4-cylinder. And something else that's unique here, it's a properly geared transmission instead of a continuously variable automatic, and that is huge. All of it really does help to make this very smooth and responsive. You know, the electrons, they really do complement the turbocharged torque, so they fill in the gaps. When you get your foot into it and the gas engine kicks in, it actually gets up and goes pretty good. Now, obviously, it's not a performance vehicle, but for a mid-size SUV, it's fairly peppy and, again, fairly efficient with that battery topped up. Net system output is a little bit more than the conventional hybrid. You get 261 horsepower and 258 pound-feet of torque. Now, that is not as much as the 2.5 liter turbo motor you can get in the gas-powered Sorento. Remember that X-Line I reviewed last year? Well, if you haven't seen that review, you can go watch that one next. That does make more total output than this. But again, this has efficiency in its advantage. And it also has a standard all-wheel drive system, and it's very sure-footed. I got caught in a pretty serious snowstorm when I picked this thing up earlier this week, but I was really impressed with the way it worked. It is an on-demand system, so it prioritizes the front wheels instead of all 4 of them in the name of efficiency. But the cool thing is there's this little screen here, and you can monitor where torque is being sent, and it actually does send torque to the rear wheels more often than most systems, like the Ford Maverick that I just tested, and you guys are going to go watch that one once you're done here. Well, that really did prioritize the front wheels, and that meant if you weren't accelerating or the front wheels weren't slipping, well, you were only sending power to the front ones. The rear ones only got it when you were accelerating and stuff like that, whereas this one gives you just a little bit of torque to the rear wheels as well, and that is handy, and it does help to make it feel planted. I was driving on some unpaved rural roads, lots of snow cover, and there was no slipping. I even tried to initiate some slipping and spinning, and there was none of it. I was very impressed with the way the system works. Now, something to note, it is a fully mechanical all-wheel drive system. Unlike Toyota's, Toyota uses a dedicated electric motor in the back to power the rear wheels. This is a mechanical system just like any other SUV, but it works extremely well. I gotta say, I really like the ride and handling too. The steering is well weighted, and what I like is it's got that progressive resistance. So when you're driving really slow, like in a parking lot, it's nice and light, and that means it's going to be very easy and quick to maneuver if you're backing into a spot. But once you start to build speed, it firms up just enough to match well with the Sorento size. Too many SUVs these days go in the opposite direction. It's light all the time, and it's really deceiving, and that can be a problem because you can misjudge how much input is required, but this is nicely matched to this size. I gotta say the brakes are a little bit soft. There's not much feeling of the regeneration, so you don't really feel like they're grabbing hold like you might feel in another hybrid or an electric vehicle, but they do bring the Sorento to a halt in a decently quick amount of time with a firm right foot. And then I gotta say, the suspension damping is very nice too. It's crisp, but it's also forgiving, so there's not much body roll unless you're really pushing it on a highway on-ramp. But the nice thing is, it balances well with the rigidity and the weight of the battery pack that's down low in this vehicle. That is usually something you are going to notice, but it is so softly sprung here. Obviously, it's not going to be as nice as a premium vehicle with adaptive or air suspension, but I gotta say, it is very smooth. It does well to absorb bumps out here. And again, there's just not much body roll. It really does make this thing feel responsive. It's still relaxed in the right ways, but it also has a nice bit of agility. It doesn't feel big and bulky. It doesn't feel really tippy. It's just nice and firmly planted. Though I do have a complaint with the drive, especially out here. The cabin isn't all that well insulated from noise, especially coming off these door mirrors. That is something I noticed way back when I tested the Sorento last time. And I don't know if it's because of this hybrid powertrain that it stands out more here, but earlier this week when I was caught in that snowstorm, well, it wasn't super windy, but I couldn't believe just how loud it was in here, especially with the radio off. And even today, I can hear a lot of wind coming off this driver's door mirror, especially now that I have the radio off and I'm talking to you guys. I don't understand what happened there. That seems like one of those things that designers and engineers should be able to nip in the bud during the development process. So that slipped through the cracks, and so did the seat comfort. And that is a big disappointment to me, because last year when I tested the Sorento, I actually really liked the cloth line seat in that X-Line trim, but this one is not doing it for me. I don't know if it's just luck of the draw or the leather in this SX trim, but these are very firm and flat. There's just not much give to them. That is the key. You know, I compliment firm seats in a vehicle like my own Volkswagen Golf. I love it, but there is just a little bit of forgiveness there too, and there's nice support. This just feels like you're sitting on a park bench that just so happens to be inside a car and wrapped in leather. But I do have to say, again, this SX trim has some good stuff like heat and ventilation up front and heat in the rear, and their captain's chairs in the Sorento, which I think is really cool, and I bet your kids will appreciate too. Now, that does make this a 6-passenger vehicle instead of a 7, but 6 seats makes way more sense for the size of this. We'll get to that a little later on, but there's lots of other good stuff in here too, like this massive 10.25-inch touchscreen, and it's got built-in navigation in the EX Plus and SX trims that also plots EV charging stations, although this one needs an update. A bunch of charging stations out this way, they aren't showing up, but I can find them in my Google Maps, so that's a bit of a bummer. But there's lots of other cool stuff too, including this PHEV screen that you can pull up here on the touchscreen, and it gives you all sorts of cool information like your state of charge. You can charge, you can check your energy flow, lots of cool stuff there. And then otherwise, there isn't much in here to tell this apart from any other version of the Sorento. There's one little button here that says EV, HEV. That's how you cycle through the different drive modes. And I do have to say, there's no proper battery save button. Now, the hybrid mode really does do that for you, but what I mean is it's not clear. That is a problem I've noticed with lots of vehicles out there. There's just an inconsistency. You know, traction control, you've always looked at that button and you know exactly what it is because the symbol is the same across all kinds of different makes and models. I wish that were the case here, because if you look at that Jeep Wrangler 4xe that I tested last year, well, that has a battery save button. You hit that, you know you're going to preserve the battery power. Here, there's no clear indication that that's what you're doing when you put it in hybrid mode. But again, I do like all the features in here. And I even like that there are a decent amount of physical controls down here on the console, but up here on the dash, things really start to come apart. And it's because you have capacitive touch controls for the HVAC as well as infotainment. That is a big no-no to me. And so is all the gloss black plastic in here. Smudge, fingerprint, and dust magnets. It looks terrible. And especially in this one, this is the top of the line trim, and it's supposed to nip at the heels of a premium product. I know premium brands do it too. Lincoln, all kinds of gloss black inside, but I just find it really brings it down market after, I don't know, a day or two. If you don't clean it all the time, you're really gonna notice it. I try to keep these testers clean, especially between when I pick them up and when we shoot, so they make it easier on Will, but this is just so hard to keep clean. And they're also kind of hard to use. If there's any buttons that you should be able to actually feel something tactile when you press them, it's climate buttons. Now, you do have rockers for the temperature as well as automatic and defrost. Those buttons are key, but the rest of them really should be touched too, because yeah, I can tap them and you can hear it beep, but that's not enough to me when I'm driving, because I don't want to actually look down. I want to be able to hit it, feel it, and know I've done something. Now, another feature I really like here is it's got Kia's connected services smartphone app, so you can control the vehicle right from your phone. You can remote start the engine, you can check stats like state of charge as well as fuel range, all that good stuff. Though I do have to say, I've had problems with it here, and I had the same problems back when I tested the Niro EV not too long ago. I have it set to remember me, remember my logins, and I even have Face ID enabled. But every second day, it clears all that information and I have to log in all over again. Now, back when it happened with the Niro, I deleted the app and I reinstalled it this time. I made sure it was up to date. So clearly there is more to the story. That's a bit of an annoyance because technology like that really is supposed to work when you want it. The whole point of having it on your phone is that it's on demand. You can pull your phone out of your pocket from literally anywhere and check on your vehicle. You can even find it with the vehicle locator. So the fact that there's those inconsistencies, I think, is going to be an annoyance, and Kia really needs to button that up. But it is cool to have, and there's all kinds of advanced safety features here too, and we'll get to those a little later on. But first, let's talk about size. Now, as far as footprint, this is about the same size as the Subaru Outback. Obviously, it has more glass, it's taller, but from bumper to bumper and width-wise, it is nearly identical. And that makes the use of space in here all that much more impressive. That's always been the thing with the Sorento, or at least for the last couple generations. Kia has really nailed it in terms of making the most of the space, and that carries forward with this latest version. I can't believe how roomy it is, and that applies to this PHEV too. There's barely less second row legroom in the back of this thing than you get in the standard version. And that's the only penalty. And I'm telling you right now, you are not going to notice a difference. The other cool thing is the second row seats slide on rails. So if you do have people in the third row, you can give them a little more legroom by sliding those seats forward. But if you're not using the third row, you can have the second row seats all the way back to really maximize the space. There's all kinds of storage in here too. The door pockets are a decent size. I can't quite fit this water bottle, which is pretty standard in this door pocket. That's a bit of a shame, but there's lots of stuff that you can take advantage of. Lots of USB ports, little cubbies everywhere. It's very well thought out. And obviously, if you need a 3-row all the time, this probably isn't gonna cut it. You're gonna wanna take a look at the Kia Telluride or the Sedona, but neither of those are available with a hybrid, let alone a plug-in hybrid powertrain. You can only get V6 engines. The Sorento really does have that diversity of having all kinds of different powertrains to pick from, and they match well with the size. There's no more V6 here. You get a 4-cylinder, you get a turbocharged 4-cylinder, a conventional hybrid, or this plug-in hybrid. And I really do like the way this one drives. And that brings us to the advanced driver aids. There's all kinds of good stuff like blind spot monitoring with rear cross traffic alert, lane keep assist, lane departure warning, lane centering. There's forward collision warning with automatic emergency braking. Now, you do have to spring for a more expensive version if you want adaptive cruise control, but it also includes the Hyundai Group's highway drive assist that'll help you with steering as long as you have your hands on the wheel. It'll even steer you through curves in the road. It's fairly smooth. Again, I would say Nissan still has a slight advantage, but this one isn't too bad. And then there are some other goodies here too, like a head-up display, a surround view monitor, and a really cool blind spot monitoring upgrade that gives you a live look at either side of the vehicle when you activate the signal. Checked it out in some of the other products like that Sedona. It's here. It is very neat the way it works because it just gives you that extra bit of peace of mind. Obviously, you should still be using your mirrors. You should shoulder check too, but to be able to activate your signal, especially on the highway, and look down and know that you have a clear path before you change lanes is great. And something else I really like is it has the Hyundai Group's junction turn assist system. I went over this with the Sedona, but we're going to talk about it again because it is just so cool. You guys know when you get to an intersection, you're going to make a left, and there's some big vehicle in the left turn lane across from you, and you can't see if there's traffic coming towards you. Well, this will warn you of that, and it is just so handy. Again, just more peace of mind. I really like the way this system works because it's not beeping and flashing. You don't actually have to watch anything. It'll just warn you in the event that you are about to make a turn with traffic coming towards you, and there's just No value you can put on that kind of peace of mind and safety, though you can put a value on this vehicle overall. Now, pricing ranges from about 47 grand to 57 grand, and that is before tax and also before rebates, and that is going to be the key because, like I said earlier, it qualifies for a $2,500 federal rebate, but there are a bunch of provincial rebates out there too, and those will really help to cut down on the price. So let's say you live somewhere like Quebec, you can get another 4 grand off the price. That's 6,500 bucks total, and that applies to all 3 trims. That is huge, and it makes this very competitive. It's already a bit cheaper than the Toyota RAV4 Prime, and it is a bit bigger. You can't get a 3rd row of seats in the RAV4, and you can get that here, as well as the fact that there's just more space overall. Now, cargo room, there's more behind the 2nd row, as well as with the 2nd row folded, but with the 3rd row upright, there's not a ton. There's less than 400 liters. It's really not much space, but if you're not using that 3rd row all the time and you have it stowed, you have more than enough room. There's about as much space in here as the RAV4. Again, that makes it very useful, but the big thing to me is if you're not charging this regularly, you may as well take a look at the conventional hybrid version because it is going to save you on gas in the long run. To recap, I like how well used the space inside the Kia Sorento PHEV is, as well as how smooth the plug-in powertrain is, and the good ride quality. I don't like the excessive wind noise, the capacitive controls, or that it isn't as efficient as the regular hybrid without the battery topped up. Am I asking to have my cake and eat it too? Yeah, maybe, but it does bug me just how much more gas this burns than the regular hybrid once the battery is used up. Just take a look at earlier. All that filming and we were burning 4.5 liters per 100 kilometers. But now that the battery's gone, that number is climbing quickly, and this is already reaching towards the 8s again. I also have a problem with all those capacitive controls inside, and the wind noise is a problem. But then it's hard to find this much usable space in an SUV this size, and that goes for every version of the Sorento. It wouldn't be fair to call it perfect, but if you can get yourself the right tax rebates and charge it regularly, it might be the right pick for you.